Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is 5:30 p.m. and the live stream has commenced. You may begin your meeting.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. Good afternoon, councillors. Good afternoon, members of SLT and members of any of the viewing residents joining us tonight. I see that we have quorum, so I call this public meeting under the Planning Act in session on Monday, February 14th, Valentine's Day, for all you romantics such as Councillor Olson. And we start off the meeting with the land recognition statement read by Councillor Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is a traditional territory of Haudenosaunee and Abitibi peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish Wanspoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations Métis and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of the Indigenous people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hildebrand. And I turn to the clerk for some opening remarks.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have some opening remarks. I would ask Ms. Wilford to please share our screen. Public meeting under the Planning Act, Monday, February 14th at 5:30 p.m. All Town of Pelham in-person public meetings have been canceled. Instead, the town is holding all meetings electronically via Zoom. Please note that no decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. The Planning Department will be providing a presentation regarding the subject applications. Participants are reminded, please ensure that your background is free from offensive or vulgar material. If inappropriate material is visible, you will be removed from the meeting. Vulgar or offensive language will not be tolerated. If inappropriate language is used, you will be removed from the meeting. Participants will remain in the waiting room until they are called to speak. Once your comments have been heard by council, your microphone will be muted and staff will turn off your camera. The Zoom chat is not being monitored, nor is recommended to contact the clerk's department during this meeting. Please contact us via email at clerks@pelham.ca. This email address is monitored during the meeting. Decorum. The public meeting under the Planning Act is a formal public hearing requiring decorum. This means that all comments are to be made through the chair. If you have pre-registered to speak, you will be given an opportunity to address council at the public portion of the meeting. If you are live streaming and wish to submit a comment live, please email clerks@pelham.ca. Please note that comments must be received during the public portion of the meeting, otherwise they will not be considered. Disrespectful comments will also not be tolerated. Please note that if decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons asked to leave. Public portion of the meeting. To allow for an efficient meeting, each member of the public will be given an opportunity to speak to council during the public portion of the meeting. Please note, after all members of the public have been given the opportunity to speak, the applicant or agent will have the opportunity to address the public comments and concerns at one time. Please note that all comments must be stated and received electronically, form part of the public record, and will be considered by planning staff when preparing their recommendation report for council's consideration. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the planner responsible for the application in writing as soon as possible. Kenny Ng, planner to application AM 09-2021, kng@pelham.ca, or Shannon LaRock, senior planner to application AM 10-2021, slarock@pelham.ca. This contact information can also be found on the Town of Pelham's website. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson that the agenda for the February 14th, 2022 public meeting under the Planning Act, special meeting of Committee of the Whole, be adopted as circulated. To you for discussion.
Okay. After viewing the agenda, is there any comments to be made? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. For the vote, I will start with Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Duncan.
Yes.
Thank you. That carries. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to item 3, being disclosure of pecuniary interests.
Thank you. After viewing the agenda, does any counselor have a pecuniary interest or nature thereof to declare? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. I have so noted. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we are now on item 4, and I will read the notice of requirements into the record. Application for zoning bylaw amendment, 1553 Pelham Street, file number AM 09-2021. A zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the property with site-specific provisions to accommodate the construction of a semi-detached dwelling on the existing lot. The Planning Act requires under Section 34 that Council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. This public meeting has been called to satisfy this request. Notice of this meeting was provided by prepaid first-class mail to all persons who are listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll within 120 meters of the subject property on January 21st, 2022. The notice provided information on the property, including the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. In addition to providing information, we will also receive any comments which any member of the public may wish to offer. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the clerk in writing as soon as possible. Contact information is available on the town's website and will also be displayed on the last slide of the staff presentation to follow. If any person or public body would otherwise have the ability to appeal the decision of the Town of Pelham to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but they do not make an oral submission at the public meeting or make a written submissions to the Town of Pelham before the bylaw is passed, they are not entitled to appeal the decision. In closing, we stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendment, and therefore any comments received will be taken into account for Council's consideration. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have Town Planner Kenny Ng in the meeting with us. Kenny, you may proceed with your presentation.
Kenny, you have the floor. Mr. Ng, you have the floor. Oh, you're just setting up, okay?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I will be presenting for the purpose of providing information of the subject site and also the site-specific amendment itself. The subject property, known municipally as 1553 Pelham Street, is located on the east side of Pelham Street, lying north of Broad Street. The subject site is approximately 809 square meters in size with a 20 meters frontage, and it currently contains a single detached dwelling and a detached accessory structure. The site-specific amendment will rezone the property from residential 2 to a site-specific residential 3 zone. This would allow for the redevelopment of the property for a semi-detached dwelling as shown from the proposed site plan. To accommodate for the specific building design, the applicant is seeking to amend 2 provisions specific for the R3 zone, maximum lot coverage and minimum interior side yard setback. If the rezoning application is approved, the applicant will proceed with the construction of the building and create a lot line separating the 2 dwelling units with a consent application to the Committee of Adjustment. When Council considers a zoning bylaw amendment, the decision shall be consistent with the provincial policy statement and conform with any applicable provincial plans, which include the Greenbelt Plan, Growth Plan, etc. According to the PPS, the subject property is located within a settlement area where growth should be directed. Similar to the PPS, the Growth Plan also designates the subject property as a settlement area. Because the subject properties is located outside of the Greenbelt Plan and the Niagara Escarpment Plan, they're not applicable for this application. The regional official plan designates the subject property as built-up area within the urban area boundary, and the local official plan designates the subject property as urban living area, built boundary within the Fawn Hill settlement area. The subject site is currently zoned as residential 2, which permits single detached dwelling. Rezoning to residential 3 will permit a semi-detached dwelling. As mentioned earlier, the application is looking to amend 2 site-specific provisions to permit a maximum lot coverage of 45%, whereas 35% is required, and also to permit a 1.3 meters minimum interior side yard setback, whereas 2 meters is required. So no public comments were received up to date. Agencies were circulated for review and comment on the application prior to scheduling the public meeting. Town departments provided comments regarding servicing and permits. Niagara Region has noted that archaeological potential of the site must be considered and will defer to the town whether an archaeological assessment will be required or not. And to that, the town will require an archaeological assessment for the subject property. Staff would recommend a rezoning the lands to a site-specific residential 3 zone with a holding provision. The proposed bylaw would note that the holding symbol would be lifted once ministry clearance is provided. So any questions or comments can be directed to my contact following this meeting. And the next steps are for staff to prepare a recommendation report for council to consider at a future public meeting once all public inputs are received. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ng, for your presentation. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I do understand that the agent, Mr. Lamont, as well as the applicant, Mr. Spears, are present at the meeting tonight and do have a short presentation.
Okay, gentlemen, you have the floor.
Ms. Wilford, can you please bring them into the meeting?
Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Heath Lamont. I'm a junior planner at Upper Canada Consultants representing the owner of 1553 Pelham Street. I'm just going to show a brief presentation. So Kenny did a really good job of providing an overview, so I'm going to try to keep my my comments short just for the sake of time. So the application pertains to the property addressed as 1553 Pelham Street, shown highlighted in this image. The property is about 0.2 acres in area and has 65.5 feet of frontage. Currently contains a single detached dwelling. It's located in an established residential neighborhood, which contains a mix of residential uses in addition to some complementary uses in the surrounding area. Immediately north of the property is the Holy Trinity Church. To the southeast and west are single detached dwellings. The neighborhood also contains some multi-unit type developments. Most notably to the southeast, there's the Kingsman Court, which has some townhouse dwellings, as well a little bit further north on Pelham Street, I believe north of Hurricane Road, there's a couple more townhouse type developments. The property is also in proximity to commercial development, particularly clustered around Highway 20, as well as the Marlene Stewart Strait Park to the west. There's actually an access to the park provided at the end of Elm Avenue. It's about a 1-minute walk from the property. You can see it's just at the edge of the picture here. So the applicant is proposing to remove the existing house to construct a semi-detached dwelling on the property. The proposed site plan and building elevation is shown in this image. Each unit has 3 functional parking spaces, so 2 in the driveway and 1 in the garage. Each unit also has a covered front porch, which is fairly typical for this area. There's also a covered rear deck at the back of each unit to provide a bit of extra amenity space in the back. So as Kenny mentioned, we're requesting to rezone the property from R2 to R3 with some site-specific provisions, as the R2 zoning does not permit semi-detached dwellings. The site-specific provisions are to permit a maximum lot coverage of 45% and a minimum interior side yard setback of 1.3 meters, or just over 4 feet. The requested site-specific lot coverage is actually below the currently permitted lot coverage under the R2 zoning. A maximum lot coverage of 50% is permitted. In terms of the requested side yard setback, the 1.3 meter side yard setback provides an adequate amount of separation between the institutional, the church to the north, and the residential property to the south, and also provides enough access to the backyard for each one of the units. So from a planning perspective, there's a few key reasons why this represents good planning. It provides efficient use of existing residential lands and efficient use of existing infrastructure and public services. The proposal contributes an additional housing units and housing types to the area, and supports the provision of housing that reflects a range of housing need within the town of Pelham. And the proposed semi-detached dwelling fits in the existing residential character of the neighborhood and has access to existing commercial services and park space. So in conclusion, the submitted zoning bylaw amendment would facilitate the construction of a semi-detached dwelling on the property. The proposed dwelling fits well into the existing neighborhood, is serviceable with existing municipal infrastructure, is in proximity to public services, commercial uses, and park space. The proposal supports provincial, regional, and local growth management strategies and directing growth to appropriate areas, providing for efficient use of land and infrastructure, and in providing a range and mix of housing types to accommodate a range of housing need. So I'm going to leave it there in terms of my presentation, and thank you for your time, and I'm happy to help answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you for your presentation.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that brings us to the public portion of the meeting. We do not have any pre-registered members of the public for this application. Having said that, I will just check the clerks@pelham.ca email address.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that it is 5:47 and we have not received any emails. Therefore, you can close the public portion of the meeting and move to committee input.
Okay, thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. We will now turn to council. Any questions either to the town's planner on his presentation or to the applicant's planner? Council? I see.
Yes.
Councilor Corr. I'm sorry. Yeah, Councilor Corr. Go ahead.
Yes, to you, Mayor, Mr. Mayor, to our city planner. Do we know the age of the home that's on the existing property?
Mr. Ng?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can check whether what exactly the year this was built in. Just give me a brief moment.
Thank you.
So yes, the property was built in the year 1900.
Thank you. Councillor?
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the planner. So you're saying it's 120 years old?
That's correct, according to town records.
So would it not be, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the clerk, would that not be considered a heritage property or a home?
Madam Clerk, or perhaps you should go to the Director of Planning, perhaps?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. The house is not on a list of our list, the town's list of non-designated properties. While it is 120 years old, it doesn't have anything kind of unique or remarkable about it. And it hasn't been identified on a list of potentially heritage properties. It certainly is not designated under the Ontario Heritage Act.
Councilor?
For you, Mr. Mayor, my final question. So if the individual doesn't register, it's still in a heritage home. I would probably think that home, obviously it's been 30 years after the forming of the town of Pelham.
Madam Planner?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, houses that are, important from a heritage perspective are either designated under the Ontario Heritage Act, and in Pelham, we have about 8 or 9 such properties that are designated under the Ontario Heritage Act. Staff does have a working list of properties. That list has never been endorsed by council, so it technically does not have any status, but it is a working list that we look at that has identified properties that may be of heritage value, and this property is not on it. So just because it's an old house doesn't always make it a heritage home or a heritage property. It needs to have some distinguishing attributes or features about it. And then typically what happens in cases like this is staff would ask to tour the house and photograph the house and document any record or anything in the house, if there is any heritage attributes, any original features and so forth that might exist, so that we can maintain that record. And that is something that we consistently do with older homes.
Councilor Court?
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Olson, I believe I saw your hand next.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. And just so you know, every day is Valentine's Day in this house. So,
Thank you.
a question for Director of Public Works, if he's available. We have the references made to roof leader discharge locations. Would that be into the stormwater management pond system or into the storm sewer system?
Director of Planning, can you answer that, or indeed is Jason, Ms. Moore? Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, I'll attempt to answer that question. The Director of Public Works is not on the call. So any connections to if there are any connections of roof water leaders, they go into the storm system. So that would go into a pond. We don't want those entering into a sanitary sewer system. And generally we try to discourage roof water leaders connected to the storm system. It's usually better to have the storm water infiltrate onto the lawn area if possible.
Okay,
Councilor?
Thank you. That's a good lead into my next question is question to the applicant or his agent. Would you be able to consider things like low impact development in the yards, like soak away ponds or features or anything like that?
To the agent, perhaps?
Through the mayor to the question, that's certainly something that we can look at as we sort of refine the design for the house more.
Okay, thank you. Councilor?
I just want to say thank you for that consideration, because this is important to us, our drainage, especially in the town. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Any other questions, comments to either the planner or the applicant's planner? Not seeing any, then I turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to the presentation of resolutions. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart that committee receive report 2021 2022-044 for information and recommend to Council that planning staff be directed to prepare the recommendation report on this topic for Council's consideration once all comments have been received. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, any discussion on this item, Council? Not seeing any, Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you. I will begin the vote with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Kaur that committee receive the applicant's presentation for information. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay. Any comment on this resolution? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk, Deputy Clerk?
Thank you. I will begin the vote with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Duncan.
Yes.
Thank you. That carries. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we did not receive any written or verbal correspondence on this application, and therefore that does bring us to item 5 on the agenda. I will now read the notice requirements.
Please do.
Town of Pelham application for zoning bylaw amendment 30, 54, 64, 66, and 68 Fillmore Boulevard, file number AM 1021. A zoning bylaw amendment to permit residential accessory structures 7.5 meters from the rear lot line. The Planning Act requires under Section 34 that Council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect to the proposed amendment. The public meeting has been called to satisfy this requirement. The notice was provided by prepaid first-class mail to all persons who are listed as owners within the last revised assessment roll within 120 meters of the subject property on January 21st, 2022. The notice provided information on the properties and the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. In addition to providing information, we will also receive any comments which any member of the public may wish to offer. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the clerk in writing as soon as possible. Contact information is available on the town's website and will also be displayed on the last slide of the staff's presentation to follow. If a person or public body would otherwise have the ability to appeal the decision of the Town of Pelham to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but they do not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the Town of Pelham before the bylaw is passed, they are not entitled to appeal the decision. In closing, we stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendment, and therefore any comments received will be considered by Council. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do believe that we have Shannon Larocque, our planner for this application, present.
Thank you. Ms. Larocque, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of Council. This portion of the meeting will deal with an application for zoning bylaw amendment that was received for 5 different properties, 30, 54, 64, 66, and 68 Fillmore Boulevard. These properties are all located in the Residences at Lookout Point subdivision, and they're all on Fillmore Boulevard. 30 Fillmore Boulevard is located on the east side of Fillmore Boulevard, just west of Hay Street. And the remaining properties, 54, 64, 66, and 68 are located on the north side of Fillmore Boulevard, just south of the Niagara Escarpment Plan area. The application requests that the limit of structural development in the rear yards be reduced to 7.5 meters from the rear lot line. That would permit structures such as storage sheds, garages, pool houses, swimming pools, decks, and gazebos, 7.5 meters from the rear lot line. And that's a reduction from the current requirement of 15 meters. Each of these properties currently contains a single detached dwelling. and some minor accessory structures such as stairs for access. And this picture in particular shows 30 Fillmore Boulevard. You can see here there is a stormwater management easement, which contains an infiltration trench for stormwater. You can see the requested 7.5 meter rear yard setback and the current requirement for the 15 meter rear yard setback. And again, for 54 Fillmore, a stormwater management easement along the rear lot line, the requested 7.5 meter rear yard setback, and the existing 15 meter rear yard setback requirement. And for 64, 66, and 68 Fillmore, again, stormwater management infrastructure in the rear and along the sides of the properties, the requested 7.5 meter rear yard setback, and the existing 15 meter rear yard setbacks. And the planning framework for this application is that the properties are located within the settlement area, according to the provincial policy statement, and within the delineated built-up area in the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Both of these designations permit residential uses. And the Niagara Region Official Plan designates the properties as being within the urban area, built-up area. This designation's jumpy mouse. It supports a range of commercial, institutional, employment, and residential uses. Of note, Regional Policy 7B111 only permits development and site alteration on properties that abut environmentally protected areas if it's been designated that there will be no significant negative impact on those features through the preparation of an environmental impact study. The town's official plan designates the property as being within the northwest Font Hill secondary plan area and low density residential special policies. This designation supports large lot single detached dwellings in an environmentally sound manner, including the protection of the interpretive, educational, and scientific value of the surrounding landscape. And in the town's official plan, policy B1624A requires that all development in this area proceed on the basis of the recommendations of an environmental impact study. The town zoning bylaw zones the properties two different zones. 30 Fillmore is zoned R1 185B, and the remaining properties are zoned R1 187. And the request would change the properties to a site-specific R1 zone that would prohibit structures within 7.5 meters of the rear lot line. And you can see it's provision K in both of those site-specific zones that states that no structures are permitted within 15 meters of the rear lot line. The change would just be to revise that to 7.5 meters. This application was circulated to commenting agencies and town departments, and a number of comments were received. Enbridge Gas and the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority offered no objections. The Niagara region advised that they have no objections, provided the recommendations of the environmental impact study are implemented. Those recommendations included the installation of permanent fencing along the rear lot lines, as well as the preparation of an ecological brochure that explains the significance and sensitivity of the adjacent natural features and offers some stewardship suggestions to those people who live along this feature, and it's to the satisfaction of the town. Public Works staff provided some comments about the infiltration trenches. They requested that they be and those are what you saw in those stormwater management easements along the rear and side lot lines of those properties. They wanted to ensure that the trenches were inspected by a certified drainage engineer, both before and after construction. They asked for confirmation that the additional runoff from structures will not negatively affect the embankments at the rear of the properties. And reinforce that no development will be allowed in the stormwater management easement except for minor landscaping, which is lower type vegetation and no large trees. They also wanted to reiterate the fact that nothing would be able to be constructed within the swales along the side and rear lot lines. Some public comments were also received in advance of the public meeting. Leo Benoit advised that he's opposed to the amendment due to concerns that future construction would interfere with the drainage and swales, causing flooding and impacting 12 Mile Creek. He's fearful that excavation and drainage issues will accelerate the erosion and make the lands unstable. He feels that unnecessary interference with the natural beauty and enjoyment of the Lathrop Nature Preserve may result from the application. Michelle Strike is concerned specifically with respect to 30 Fillmore Boulevard and that the ground disturbance will lead to soil erosion and collapse onto Hay Street. There is some evidence of erosion already, which she has indicated, such as the vegetation and tree loss. She's also concerned that the distance to the swale is short and that any water backup will put additional pressure on the hill and cause further soil erosion and washout. Some technical reports were provided in support of the application. A planning justification report prepared by Better Neighborhoods Development Consultants, a scoped environmental impact study prepared by Natural Resource Solutions Incorporated, and also a stormwater management assessment prepared by Upper Canada Engineers and Planners. Digital copies of these reports are available by contacting me through the contact information on the last slide. And next steps for this application, there will be no decisions or recommendations tonight. Once all of the comments have been received, planning staff will consider them and prepare a recommendation for council's consideration. If anyone wishes to receive future notices or ask questions about the applications, they're welcome to contact me. And my extension at the town is extension 319, or through email slarock@pelham.ca. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. LaRocque, for your presentation. Turn to Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I do understand that we have the agent, Mr. Romanko, with us this evening. I would ask Ms. Wilford to please bring Mr. Romanko into the meeting.
Okay, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Dan Romanko. I'm a planner with Better Neighborhoods. I'm here on behalf of the landowners for the 5 properties that were listed: 30, 54, 64, 66, and 68 Fillmore. I do have a brief presentation to share, if you don't mind, and I'll just look to share that right now. One moment, please. Can everybody see that?
Yes, I think so.
Great, thanks. Okay, so Ms. LaRocque has done a fairly thorough job of providing information in terms of the background for this application. But so in an effort to be to avoid redundancy, I'll just kind of go through this rather quickly. She's already indicated that essentially this is the proposed ask for council this evening, and it's to reduce the rear yard setback for the purposes of providing a greater enjoyment of the amenity space. And it impacts 5 properties. Just of note here, you may see that on number 66, there's a deck that appears to be encroaching into that 15-meter setback. And just for the record, that deck was approved at the Committee of Adjustment back in 2018. So of note, these stormwater easements are to be maintained, and there's no development proposed. Many of the homeowners, or some of the homeowners, have ideas about the expansion of their amenity space. Not everybody does, but nevertheless, they'd like permissions as part of this application. This shows the existing conditions that were considered as part of the environmental impact study. Depicts all the inventoried trees, the drip line, the edge of the lawn, ecological classification, etc. As per the EIS recommendations, each of those properties will have a fence installed at the rear property without a gate to prohibit any access to the ravine or natural environment. And what you see on the screen here is the draft copy of the ecological brochure that outlines information for homeowners with regards to land stewardship and information about the ecological features themselves. So just in summary, the rear property line has been confirmed through correspondence with the NPCA as the stable top of slope. We did an EIS in support of this amendment, and they've provided those proposed recommendations, which we're certainly comfortable with. In addition to that, a stormwater assessment report has been prepared by Upper Canada, and the conclusions of that were that any of these proposed uses will not alter or impact the stormwater management system that was approved back in 2013. So in summary, we're just looking to move the rear yard setback from 15 meters as it is currently to 7.5 for the greater enhanced enjoyment of the rear yard amenity space. You can see the list of buildings and structures that are included, including swimming pools and the like, but I think it's safe to say that because this is an established neighborhood, we can probably scratch out garages. I can't see that as a possible building or structure that would be permitted at this point. To date, we've got already regulations in place to prevent any encroachment into the servicing easements, including vegetation over a certain height, and there is to be no obstruction of overland flows or the filling of swales or anything of that nature to prevent proper stormwater drainage. The additional improvements or the mechanisms to protect the environment that are included as part of the recommendations here are to fence along the rear property line and not provide any access, distribute the ecological brochure that I showed you earlier. That has had a review of staff, by the way, and revisions are currently being conducted by the EIS consultant. And lastly, no building within 1 meter of the side yard to protect any of the existing drainage swells. So that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have of me.
Okay, thank you for your report. Madam Clerk, Deputy Clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to the public portion of the meeting. We do not have any pre-registered members of the public for this application. However, I will just check the clerks@pelham.ca email address. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that it is 6:13 p.m. and we have received no emails, and therefore you may close the public portion of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Now we go to council. Before I ask members of the council if they have any questions or comments, I would like to, if I could, ask the town planner, Ms. LaRock. Could you go back to the page that had the comments from Enbridge, NPCA, and what have you? Could you bring that up, please?
Certainly.
Thank you. Great, thank you. I'm looking at, oh, pardon?
You're welcome.
Oh, okay, thanks. So I'm looking at the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, no objection. So we did, in fact, get something back to them. So we do know that they did look at the plan, and we did get a returned back, and they said they had no objection to this amendment. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and if council was to decide to allow this, that goes on does that go on the deed? Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, what would happen is that it would become the zoning for the property, the new requirements. So the zoning is applicable law under the building code, and it would be required that any future property owners comply with that new setback.
Okay, and I guess what I'm getting at is if someone was to sell one of these houses, how would the next owner, and let's say they didn't put the fence up or and do any construction, how would the new owner know what the boundaries were? If it's not on the deed, is it up to the new owner to do due diligence, or how would that work?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. It is up to the owner to be informed about what the zoning regulations are for their specific property. It is possible that staff can, that we could include fencing requirement in the zoning so that too is part of the zoning requirement.
I see. I guess also too, I'm wondering about the 1 meter offset from the side yard. I mean, we all know that we have had experiences in the past where there's been swales. Homeowners have filled those swales in, and then the problems begin. I thought for a while, I thought in fact that we were including in the deeds that if the town had a swale, a drainage swale, that was indeed put on the deed. Is that true or not?
There are a couple of things that ensure that the drainage patterns that have been approved by the town are maintained on this property. One is the fact that the original subdivision agreement includes an overall lot grading plan, and that subdivision agreement passes on to future owners of the property, so they too are bound by complying with those approved plans from the town. The other item that ensures compliance with respect to these properties is that the town has easements registered where there is stormwater management infrastructure. And those easements, there is a legal requirement that is registered on the property and would be found through title search when somebody is taking ownership. But those generally just apply to where we have underground infrastructure, not just swales.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Thank you for those. Those are all my questions. I now turn to council. Any questions or comments on this proposal? And Councillor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just to the rest of the councilors, I took the opportunity to obtain the technical reports on this application, and I would encourage each of you to read them a little more not thoroughly, but read through them to get a better understanding of what's being asked for. And we do have some concerns from some of the neighboring residents, and these reports address those concerns. So it might be worth your while to take a few minutes away from Councillor Olson's everyday Valentine's Day and just spend a little bit of time to read through them, because it certainly made things a lot more clear for me too. So,
okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wink. Let's go, Councillor Hildebrand. You have yet to address.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the presentation. I have the same concerns in a little more detail than you with regards to sidewalls, side yard swales, and stormwater drainage issue. I see the new subdivisions in my area, and landowners are putting fences in side yard swales, and I see all kinds of fancy work being done in the swales at the back of their house, which is the drainage area. And I'm not sure how this is controlled. How is this addressed, like the mayor said, on a deed or something? Because obviously, when they're putting these fences in, they're solid, very expensive fences. And eventually that's going to cause a problem, because when you have to go back there and service these areas, which the town will have to do at some point, I'm not sure whether there's enough notice to these owners, because I don't know that they're concerned about what's happening.
Ms. LaRock, any comments on those concerns?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Well, it is up to each property owner to do their own due diligence to ensure that they're not impacting easements where there are no structures permitted, and also to ensure that they are still meeting the requirements of the approved log grading plans that the town has put in place through the subdivision agreement or at the time of building permit, depending on the situation. If a property owner chooses to go ahead and obstruct a swale or put a structure within it, it would be at their risk, and it becomes a legal matter for the town to have it removed.
Councillor?
Well, all I know is I've had several neighborhood disputes over this already. And it's not a very friendly situation. Every time we approve this kind of stuff, it sounds like we're just approving something that's going to be an issue.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Kaur, did I see your hand?
Yes, you have, Your Honor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to one of the presenters. What type of fence? Is it going to be a wooden fence or a chain link fence?
Let's go to the applicant's planner, perhaps.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't think the type of fence has been specified. If it were my home, I would put up a black wrought iron fence to permit the maximum visibility and enjoyment of the ravine environment in the rear. And just so that it's somewhat permeable in terms of its viewing opportunity, but and still maintains the intent of the fence, which is to prohibit access.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I fully agree with that decision. My second question is, by allowing the change, would they be able to put a second dwelling property on any of these properties?
Let's go to the town planner, Ms. Luak.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Provided that the accessory structure met the permissions in the zoning bylaw for the second dwelling unit, it would be permitted.
Councillor Court?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Olson, did I see your hand?
Yes, you did, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Through you, this area is probably one of the one or two most sensitive parts of our community with respect to the 12 Mile Creek. And we have an obligation to protect the water quality and the temperature. I've read the reports, and I read the one that was issued in 2013 by Upper Canada, I think it was. And their recommendation at that time, I think it must have been to have the 15 meters. So now we're taking the same corporation or the same consultant, and they're moving to 7.5. Now, if you take, that might be all right, but I kind of like to know the difference. You know, it's profoundly different to say 15 to 7.5. Looking at infiltration gallery number 1, which serves 68 Fillmore Drive or Boulevard. It has 334 square meters of roof area. The infiltration gallery, and if I'm reading correctly, this is the capacity of the infiltration gallery is 376 square meters. That's a very small difference, 334 to 376. And that's based upon a 5-year design event. Now, it strikes me that that's cutting it pretty close. And if you start adding in gazebo roofs, change room roofs, even swimming pools and the surface that goes along with swimming pools, I think that creates a pretty tight number. And I want to be clear. I want to make sure that I'm reading this correctly, because it says that in all of the areas all the different building lots that it's very close to where we are right now. Now, Lookout Point was an example of a lot of great LID interventions and facilities, and it's pointed out that every single lot in that area has one, or has at least one important LID feature. But if you look at some of these lots, like Lot 30, Lot 30 is part of a group of lots, and believe me, once this is approved, there's going to be a lot of groupings, because I don't see somebody on Phil Morey with no pool and having 10 people without a pool. This is going to cover the whole thing eventually. It looks to me like these are sized maybe for the product or the development when it stood there before without the pools. Upper Canada reaches the conclusion that they're adequately sized, but I'm not sure about that.
Okay, Councillor, those are your comments, I take it?
I guess those are observations, because I don't see. Then we say that, then we talk about typically structural additions will have LID features attached to them. We'll have, not required, but typically. Is there any way we could, if somebody puts a pool in, can we ensure that water's not shipped over the side of the hill when it's drained? And could we put LID features on each one of these new things? Because this is, I think this is the way to go, is probably put more LID features in there, and infiltration galleries or whatever has to go with them, and not leave it so that it's typically, this is what we do, this is what we do. So finally, I'm told that the slope on at Phil Morey Drive is that the responsibility of, I guess it's the Conservation Authority, and it's responsibility of the town on Hay Street. If this doesn't work and the hill comes down into Hay Street, who's responsible for that? That would be my questions.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Lurock, any comments on the councillor's concerns?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of the calculations in the report, I can't speak to the specifics, unfortunately. I am aware that they provide it, and I have shared it with those who have asked, and am happy to share it more widely to anyone else who wishes. Upper Canada has provided an updated stormwater management report, which indicates that there aren't any concerns with the addition of additional structures on the current infrastructure. In terms of the pool water, that is addressed in the brochure, or it will be addressed in the final brochure that's to be distributed to residents, in terms of what are safe ways to get rid of their pool water, draining it forward into the front yards and into the storm sewer, as opposed to, or I'm sorry, the sanitary sewer. Maybe I'm wrong on that. One of the sewers, whichever one's the right one, as opposed to down the ravine. And sorry, was there another question?
Councillor Olson, did that cover all your concerns, or did you have any more?
No, not really. I was more interested in the, I'd like to have some confirmation on what I'm reading here, because it appears to say to me that in gallery number 1, which serves 16 Phil Morey Boulevard, the roof is 334 square meters, and the capacity of the infiltration gallery is 376 equivalent square meters space. Am I reading that correctly? Because that looks to me like it's awful close, and that refers to a 5-year event. And, like 5-year event, maybe 15 years ago was a 5-year event. Now it's like a 2-year event. So, I'm just questioning that. So would we have, would there be an opportunity to review this again before we move on with these types of things? I don't know.
Ms. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we will have Public staff respond to that in particular. Unfortunately, they're not with us tonight. I do know that they reviewed the updated stormwater management report that was provided, and they didn't have concerns about it, but I will specifically pose your concern about the calculations to them.
Is that adequate, Councillor?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple more questions, but I'll leave the floor. So.
Okay. I see Councillor Stewart next then.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Before I ask a question, I have a comment to make. These are all big houses on beautiful ravine lots. And according to what Ms. LaRocque has said, the people who purchased these properties not all that long ago knew at the time that it was a 15-meter setback. And I find it frustrating that people buy something knowing what they're buying, and then they want it to be different. And my question is, under the section where it said Public Works, and it suggested there should be a drainage engineer involved, who would be who would bear the cost for that? Thank you.
Ms. LaRocque on that question?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of the drainage engineer, that would be borne by the property owners and to the satisfaction of Town Public Works. In terms of the zoning requirements, yes, those are available, and it is up to the property owners to do their due diligence in terms of what are the restrictions and the permissions for properties that they purchase in advance. And just while I'm thinking of it, Councillor Olson, your other question that I forgot was that Hay Street is the responsibility of the town. It's part of town property, including that ravine.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. LaRocque. Councillor Stewart, you had the floor. Any other questions?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillor with any other questions? And we return to Councillor Olson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You can drive down Hay Street and you can see right up into those backyards. And that's quite a slope that comes down there to Hay Street. And I just think that if that got soaked, water soaked and waterlogged, that there's going to be a lot of stuff end up on the street. And I would imagine in a good rainstorm, even right now, you'll find a lot of sand down at the bottom of the hill. But I wanted to ask a question about the operation of the existing stormwater management pond and and what's happening there with respect to volumes and the temperature. And I think we've probably I thought we would have be monitoring the temperature on all of the stormwater management ponds. I found out that Rice Road had been allowed to lapse, and we've started that up again. But do we have any idea of what the effect of runoff or stormwater has been on the temperature and on the volumes going into 12 Mile Creek?
Ms. LaRocque?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I can check with Public Works staff on that and get back to you. I'm not aware, but it looks like the Director of Planning may response.
And we will indeed go to the Director of Planning, Ms. Weens.
Thank you. Yes. And I can advise that under the conditions of the subdivision agreement, the developer was required to monitor that stormwater management pond facility for 5 years. And they did so and submitted monitoring reports to the town and to the MPCA with regards to that. I don't believe that there has been anything more recently done in, say, like the last year or two, but they were required to certainly do ongoing monitoring for a period of time.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. Weens. Any other questions? I wonder, I will ask this, we seem to be needing perhaps a little more information. How can we defer this decision tonight until we get more information? Or perhaps I should turn to the clerk. And what do you suggest on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do see that the Director Weens is looking to comment.
Okay. Ms. Weens?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if I may. I mean, tonight you are not making a decision. You're just going to receive the information.
Oh, okay.
And then we will come back with you at a later date with a recommendation report. And it will be at that point in time that you will make a decision to either support the application or refuse the application.
Excellent. Very good.
Tonight, there is no decision being made. It's to really get the feedback and the input tonight.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Any other questions, comments from members of council? Not seeing any. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to the presentation of resolutions. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrand that committee receive report 2022-42 for information as it pertains to file number AM 10-2021, and that committee directs planning staff to prepare the recommendation report on this application for consideration. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay. One last time. Any comments or questions on this resolution? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk, Deputy Clerk.
Thank you. I will begin the vote with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink that committee receives the applicant's presentation for information. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay. Any other questions, discussions on this? Not seeing any.
Thank you for the vote. I will begin with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart that committee receive the written correspondence as listed on the agenda, and that committee receive the verbal presentation. Oh, sorry, there's no verbal presentations this evening. So that would be it. That committee receive the written correspondence as listed on the agenda. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Not seeing any.
Thank you. I'll begin the vote with Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to item 6 on the agenda, being adjournment. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson that the special committee of the whole public meeting under the Planning Act be adjourned. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay. Any discussion on adjournment? Not seeing any.
Thank you for the vote. I will begin with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is 6:38, and you may gavel out your meeting.
Okay. Good night, everyone, and to everyone,
everyone.
a happy
Night.
Valentine's Day. And Councillor Hildebrand, you either have a bad cold or you're going through change of life. Well, what is that?
I think I'm going through a change of life.
Have a good night.
Thanks.